Pixio, they're not content to rest on their laurels. They're back again with the PX278. But the outrageous claim here is 95% DCI-P3 color coverage. It's HDR on a TN panel. 2560 by 1440, 144 Hertz, HDMI 2.0 inputs, HDMI 1.1 inputs, DisplayPort 1.2, VESA 100mm mounts. It's the PX278. The PX278 has an external power brick. On the one hand, that's weight that's not part of your monitor for your VESA arm mounting solution, but on the other hand, power brick. I will also mention that there is a 3.5mm headphone jack on the bottom, so if you want to take the audio through your monitor, you've got that option, like with HDMI, like you're using a console or something like that. You can run the audio back out of the monitor and into headphones or into an amplifier, ideally. There's also a USB 2.0 port, but that's for firmware upgrades. That's not for you. All right, the first thing that I noticed is Pixio has sort of changed their minimalist, understated aesthetic just a little bit. We've got the gamer lines on the back of the monitor, whereas the PX277 was super clean and really thin, very understated. There was a little pocket here at the bottom of the monitor for your electronics. This monitor's a little different. Also notice the VESA mounting holes. The VESA mounting holes are in a more traditional location in the middle of the monitor, whereas in prior Pixio monitors, the VESA mounting situation was at the bottom. I liked the VESA mounting situation at the bottom in mounting solutions where you had independent control of each monitor because you could get a little bit more lift. I'm taller, I like the more lift for, basically the same monitor arm setup. With this, you don't really get quite as much lift, but it is more traditional. So if you've got a crescent monitor arm, such as the one from Spaceco, where they sort of assume that all the monitors' VESA mounting situation is gonna be in the same place, this works a little better. So mixing monitors or mixing rotations, this layout probably works a little better. And it's probably a lesson learned there for Pixio. It's like, oh, we can move the VESA mounting location. And then it's like, oh, well, that caused us some problems in some other use cases, so maybe let's not do that. For power and everything else, there's a hat switch. It's a multi-directional button that you can also push down on. This is sort of similar to the way that Samsung does it, or at least they used to do it on the monitors like the U28D, 590D. But Pixio does it pretty effectively here, and I find this a little easier to use than the row of buttons along the bottom edge of the display. The monitor does have a tilt adjustment, but unfortunately there's no height adjustment. Fortunately, from the front, they haven't really changed much. It's still the really super thin edge of the display. Now, the actual edge of the LCD is a little bit inset from that, but this is a nice matte finish. It is a TN panel, as I mentioned before, and I think we need to get to the test bench and see how this thing is gonna do under test. So the first tool in our suite of tests is the Leo Bodnar Latency Analyzer. And on this monitor, it's coming in pretty good, about 3 milliseconds, 2.8 milliseconds, 3 milliseconds, before it starts to draw the frame. This is a really good result. Of course, we can see at the bottom of the frame that it's about 18 milliseconds, and that makes sense. At 60 Hertz, it takes 16 milliseconds to draw the display, so a result like this means that the display is drawing the frame as fast as it should. Scale that up from 60 Hertz to 144 Hertz, and the monitor is displaying that 1/144th of a second in 1/140th amount of time. That might sound weird, but there are some monitors that will take a 60 Hertz input signal and actually display it at 120 Hertz, but without interpolation. So it means that it displays the frame in 1/120th of a second, holds it, and then displays another frame, as opposed to something you see on some TVs that are like motion enhancement. So this is a really good result from the Leo Bodnar latency checker. The second thing in our toolbox is lagom.nl. It's a great website. You can look for pixel layout, subpixel layout, all that kind of thing. This is a TN panel, as I said before, so it's one of the first and the earliest LCD technologies. It does not have a good reputation in terms of being color accurate. It does not have a good reputation in terms of other stuff, but this is a modern process TN panel. So 95% DCI-P3 in terms of your color gamut. That's kind of a big claim, but it's within the realm of possibility with the TN panel, advanced electronics, and all of the details. But there's also color shift. So when you move from side to side or up and down, you do get a little bit of a color shift. It's definitely not the worst that I've seen. Monitors like the Samsung U28D, 590D, those are also a TN panel. Those are the worst of the worst. as far as TN panels go. That's a 4K panel. This is 2560 by 1440, as I said, and this TN panel is much, much better than the other TN panel. The other really awesome tool with the Lagom tool suite, you can figure out your subpixel layout just by looking at a picture. This is really close to call. It's tough to tell. It looks to me like it's an RGB layout, but I can only barely tell. It's a 2560 by 1440 panel at 27 inches, but usually the pixels are large enough that I can get kind of close in there and see them, but the interpixel gaps on this display seem to be much smaller than I would expect, so it is really hard to tell what the subpixel layout is. It's something special. But the RGB layout here is awesome. The reason I say that the RGB layout here is awesome is because a lot of software tries to do, subpixel rendering and sharpening. And we've taken a look at that in some of our other monitor reviews. And when you try to do RGB subpixel sharpening with a BGR layout, things go bad fast. So the software that you have, like if you're building a Hackintosh or something like that, you need the RGB pixel layout for maximum quality because Apple just doesn't care. Windows tries to deal with things other than RGB subpixel layouts, but it seems like there's a lot of bugs in that because we've got some very famous BGR subpixel layout panels, and the text sharpness just isn't there unless you fiddle with it endlessly. And my favorite monitor test is seeing how fast the monitor actually is. Chase squares and the motion blur. And I'm happy to report on this monitor, it looks really good. Lagom.nl and Blurbusters both have pretty good tests for running this kind of thing on your monitor if you have a high-speed camera, which pretty much every cell phone over the last 10 years can do at least 1080p, 120 hertz. You can use that, or 720p, 120 hertz. You can use that high-speed frame rate to capture your monitor doing something and then look at it in slow motion and see what the picture looks like. Pro gamers, they've got the twitch down pat, and you might not be able to take in the full frame, but you can actually see some stuff. The Lagom.nl, it's got a counter that counts up. Stepping through that in slow-mo, you can see it counting up. You can clearly see the defined numbers, and the buttons let you play with what color the background is. So, light to dark transition time is going to be different than a gray to gray transition time. Of course, Pixio says that their transition time is 1 millisecond, which is 1/1000th of a second, but it's 144 hertz refresh rate, so you would not expect to see any adjacent squares that are lit up in the chase test. But you can see here, it's not quite that perfect, but it is pretty darn good. This is a worthy upgrade over the PX278 in terms of responsiveness, 144 hertz, that kind of thing. Our test system here, it's an Intel 10600K with a 2080 Ti doing the FreeSync thing, and this is a 2080 Ti, so I had to check the checkbox to enable G-Sync. But enabling that, we play Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 144 hertz, but you can see that it dips down to 120, 130 as you're playing it. The monitor does have an on-screen FPS counter, so I had to turn that on, and you can see that it is sending a lower rate, but I don't have any tearing, and it was a really shockingly smooth and good gameplay experience. Now, I've been gaming more on the 4K 120 hertz display, but this was so nice and responsive and fast and snappy. It was genuinely a very impressive gaming experience. And hey, any excuse to play some games in the office, especially during the quarantine, I'll take it. So in terms of color accuracy, we used our Spider 5 and Display Cal to do the color calibration for the display. It is pretty good. It's not outstanding, and you wouldn't expect it to be outstanding with the TN panel. An IPS panel or something like that would obviously be better, but those displays are also probably going to be more expensive, and they're not going to be 144 hertz. Pixio does have some models that are IPS, and in terms of like responsiveness, clarity, like the gaming attributes, this monitor is a better monitor for those things. 95% DCI-P3 means you can still get away with editing and light photo retouching and that kind of thing. You should just be aware that 95% DCI-P3, you do have to fiddle with some settings on the monitor to get that to come out, but you can download our display calibration file from the website, same as we always do with these kind of displays. Of course, there's a little bit of variation from monitor to monitor, so our display calibration may not work for your PX278, but maybe it gets you in the right neighborhood. It's a pretty good deal at around US 300. That's what it's launching at. It's what you can pick it up for on Newegg. I think that's a pretty good deal for 144 hertz 2560 by 1440 display that's this high end. The stand is the the thing about the monitor that is perhaps a little bit lacking. I like the style of the old Pixio stand more than the new one. The feet come a little bit farther forward than the old Pixio stand. I think the old Pixio stand was a little more understated, but this one looks a little more gamery, so it's really a nit. I'm picking little nits there, but overall Pixio's done a pretty good job with the upgrade. So that's been a quick look at the PX278. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. I'm signing out, and I'll see you later.